our postmodern age of division, anger, anxiety, and confusion, the most dangerous weapon you have is your own mind.
Take control! Question everything!
This is the Intellectual Freedom Podcast.
There was a brutal, desperate tactic sometimes used in the Middle Ages. When a king or a great warlord was killed in the middle of a battle, his generals, which were keenly aware of their troops, they were afraid they would panic. They knew that if the infantry found out the crown had fallen, the morale would shatter and the army would break and run. So they would take the king's fresh corpse, drag it over to his war horse, and strap him to the saddle. They would bind his dead hands to the reins, wedge iron braces under his armor to keep his spine straight, and prop his chin up behind the visor. And then they would send the horse walking back out onto the ridge. And the soldiers down in the mud, down below, they would look up. They would see the king's armor gleaming in the sun, that they'd see the royal banner waving in the air, and they would scream their battle cries. They would charge right back into the meat grinder. They would bleed and they would fight, many times die in that dirt, completely unaware that they were laying down their lives for a dead man, a ghost. So what happens when the story that built our entire civilization gets strapped to a horse and led around like it's alive, even though it's dead? Think about that for just a second. We look around today and we're fighting so desperately. We're screaming at each other on X. We're at each other's throats at the ballot box. We're tearing our neighbors apart at local school board meetings, all to quote unquote save our society. But there is a rot in the air. We can smell it. We're just terrified, too terrified to look up at the ridge and admit the absolute horrifying truth that the culture that we are fighting for has flatlined, and actually it's flatlined a long time ago. That's the thesis of the book that we're going to be reading. That armor, it's just propped up by iron braces. We're not fighting a culture war to save the kingdom. We're just screaming over who gets to arrange the flowers at the funeral. So today we're going to look at the ghost in the mirror. We're going to talk about the philosophical and cultural death of God and the Christian foundations of Western civilization. And I know that's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard for me, but the illusion of endless human progress that stepped into this gap, and the tragic reality of why having literally every technological gadget in the world still leaves us starving for the only two things that we actually need to survive. That's our challenge today. So welcome back to the Intellectual Freedom Podcast. I'm Dr. David Hopkins. I'm a humanities professor. I'm your host and guide through this podcast. And as I introduced last week, we're kicking off a brand new series, Against the Machine, by Paul Kingsnorth. And before we get too deep into the weeds today, let me give you the 30,000 foot view of how we're tackling this beast of a book. So it cleanly breaks into 4 parts. And today we look at the roots of our culture, where we came from, how it all started, and the Western deviation. And then part 2, we figure out where the machine actually came from and where was it birthed and how did it take form. Part 3, we look at the machine's values, how the machine's values are just infect our daily lives every day, right now. And then part 4, this is the best part, the escape hatch, right? the practical path to not just survive, but thrive in this machine-driven world. But if we want to understand the machine, we have to pin it down. And we're going to pin it down in a story. And we have to look at this historical timeline. And the story of the West is as old as almost time itself for us. You might love it. You might hate it. You might try to secularize it and dress it up in modern academic language, but it is an inescapable story of creation, the fall, the corruption, and then the ultimate redemption. That is the operating system of the West. If you don't get that, you don't get where we came from, where we are today in the cycle of degradation, and where things may hypothetically, according to Paul Kingsnorth, end up. So let's go back to the book. So to understand the machine, we have to look at a very foundational story and probably the myth, the story of our culture, and that's the Garden of Eden. Forget the Sunday school cartoon version of the story for just a minute. Imagine instead the ultimate state of human integration. Imagine a world where there is no anxiety, no separation. There is no machine. Man and woman standing in the cool evening, walking side by side with the Creator. I know it is so beyond us, even if you are a devout Christian, of what that would even look like, what that would feel like, what that would be like to walk daily, literally, side by side with God. Heck, I challenge you, even if you're an atheist and you're listening right now, about ready to turn this thing off, to try and imagine or try to imagine God, the God, a God, the one God that ruled everything, always, created everything. I mean, that is the state of humanity in the Garden of Eden. I guess it would be the ultimate state of freedom, peace, happiness, serenity, and just pure contented bliss. If I'm just trying to envision it myself, there's no separation here, right? There's no separation between God, man, and nature. A tree isn't lumber to chop down and burn, and an animal isn't just protein to raise and kill. Everything's like vibrating with life, and humanity is simply a participant in this chorus. This was the era of communion. This was life for humanity before the fall. No war, no work, no pain, no death. And if only things could stay so perfect, right? But that's not how it works, and that's not how it did work, because into that stillness, another voice enters the garden. Not loud, very quiet, actually. Not forceful, just present. The serpent. And what's striking in this is he doesn't come with a weapon. He doesn't come with a command. He comes with a question. And that question was, did God really say you can't eat from that tree? It's subtle, almost harmless. But in this line, something profound has already shifted, and nothing's even happened yet. Because for the first time, trust is no longer the only lens. Now there's another possibility. Maybe what you've been given isn't the whole story, as the serpent tries to convince Adam and Eve. And that's how it begins. The serpent doesn't offer them an apple. He offers them a trade, a transaction. Give this up and you'll gain something more. If you eat this, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. And suddenly, the world is reframed. What was once a gift now feels like a limitation. What was once enough now feels like something is being withheld. That's the deeper archetype of the serpent. Not chaos, not destruction, but deception that feels reasonable. A voice that doesn't deny truth outright, but bends it just enough. A whisper that doesn't force rebellion, but makes it seem like growth. Because the serpent's real power isn't in what he says, it's how he changes the question. From trust to suspicion. From relationship to transaction. From being to becoming, or the potential of becoming something more. And once that shift happens, once everything becomes a negotiation, a calculation, what do I get out of this? The decision almost makes itself. That's the danger of the serpent. Not that he drug anybody into darkness, because he didn't. He was a serpent. He had no arms. He had no legs. The choice was made. But what he did do is he made that choice feel like a step toward something better, an upgrade. An upgrade like clarity, like empowerment, like finally seeing things as they really are. But in the end, what he offers is not freedom. Not freedom at all. It's a fracture. It's a breaking of trust that changes everything that comes after. And maybe that's why the story still feels so close to us, because that voice hasn't gone away. It still sounds just as calm, just as reasonable, still asking, did God really say that? Did God really say that? Right there in that whisper, the Western deviation is born. The temptation wasn't just about breaking the rule. It was the temptation to stop being a participant in creation and to become the master of it. In that one catastrophic moment of reaching out their hands, humanity made a series of devastating trade-offs that you and I still live in today. We traded communion for knowledge, the desire to dissect and control the world, rather than live in harmony with it. We traded humility for power, deciding that we didn't need the Creator's limits anymore. We traded holistic togetherness for the right to subdue and subjugate the earth as predators. Stop right here, right now. Reframe the context on the fly with me. Is there an overwhelming desire today to control the world versus create community and harmony? Yes. Is there a perverse no limits to anything mentality and culture today? Yes. Humility is weakness. But being loud, egotistical, and obnoxious in your face, that's a strength. Yes. Is there a might equals right mentality? Yes. And those with money and power, privilege, pretty much do what they want, while the rest of us are held to a different standard? Yes. But back to the Bible. The ultimate tragedy in our grasp to become immortal God. We traded eternal health, beauty, for a world infected by disease, sickness, dying. When the gates of Eden slammed shut after they ate the apple from the tree of knowledge, we didn't just lose a garden. We lost our roots. We were grounded by the Creator. Heck, we walked with the Creator every single day. And now we're cast out into the dust. And we have been frantically trying to build the machine ever since. You know those sly promises of the serpent that we could be godlike, be like God. And well, we've been trying to engineer our way back to a paradise that we broke. Yeah, I know it's a lot, but this, my friends, is a foundational component of the machine. The machine that we have been building for centuries now. This isn't just an ancient myth. It is the exact step-by-step blueprint of our current reality. Even if you're not Christian, you can surely see the psychological impacts, right? Every single aspect of modern life is touched by that initial trade. But what happens when the foundational story, it didn't all collapse instantaneously, right? Things don't just usually fall apart in one fell swoop and the biblical story plays out from Old Testament to New Testament in the blink of an eye. No, it takes centuries to get from Old Testament to New Testament to the Christianization of Europe, the bedrock that held the West together for a millennia and then dies. Because honestly, look out the window. That is exactly where we're at today. Humanity leaves the garden. We spend thousands of years building Western civilization on the foundation of that story, on the belief in a creator, in moral limits, in a divine, in a structured order. But then as Kingsnorth points out, the Enlightenment hits. And this is a humongous turning point. We think we get so incredibly smart, so scientific, so technologically advanced that we decide collectively that we just don't need that old silly story anymore. We outgrew it. Christianity's a silly myth, a wives' tale, a mental crutch for the weak-minded, for the peasants among us, to, quote, make us feel better about death and dying. All those basic tropes, you know them all. They have been pounded into our minds by the, quote, unquote, science of the New World Order. And those that are so egotistical that they believe on their own, with their own mind, they got it all figured out. That's the Enlightenment spirit, and it lives today. But before we get too modern, we need to sit in on the 1800s for just a minute, the late 1800s, and to the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, to be specific. People constantly confuse Nietzsche. You see it on a bumper sticker or pseudo-intellectual blogs that quote, God is dead. Like it's a victory lap. Like he was some smug, egotistical 19th century atheist celebrating the fact that we finally threw off the shackles of religion. Yes, most certainly, he was an atheist. But if any of you really read Nietzsche, he was anything but smug. Anything but, I've got life all figured out, and those religious fools don't kind of guy. No, he wasn't celebrating. In much of his writing, he's actually terrified. Nietzsche understood human nature. He knew that we're prone to very, very bad things. He knew that if you rip the foundation out from under a house, the house is going to collapse on top of you. To explain this sheer terror, he wrote a parable. It's one of my favorite parables. I love it. I use it in class frequently because what I love about Nietzsche is he was an atheist, but he understood in becoming an atheist the consequences of such a thing. And, when you listen to this scene, I'm going to read it verbatim for you. Imagine the stakes of this. Imagine this scene just for 1 second. I don't know. I always see some seedy, dark street of a European city in the late Middle Ages. I don't know. Just very dark, very dim, very dank. Like with those fallish, wintry images we see in America of Europe and northern European cities. But let me read this parable for you, and I'll let you just absorb it on your own. So it begins like this, quote, "Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the brisk morning hours, ran to the marketplace, and cried incessantly, 'I seek God, I seek God'? As many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. 'Has he got lost?' asked one. 'Did he lose his way like a child?' asked another. 'Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage, emigrated?' Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. 'Whither is God?' he cried. 'I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I, all of us, his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all the suns. Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not continually closing in on us? The people in the marketplace just stared at him. And the madman threw his lantern on the ground, where it shattered and went out. He looked at the crowd, and he said, "I've come too early. This tremendous event is still on its way. It has not yet reached the ears of men." End quote. That was the 1880s. Today, the tremendous event has arrived. The horizon has been totally wiped away. We did unchain the earth from its sun. So what did man, in his infinite, arrogant science, wisdom, replace God with? Kingsnorth actually gives us the brutal answer when he says, quote, "The vacuum created by the collapse of old taboos was filled by the poison gas of consumer capitalism." End quote. We tore down the old structures thinking it would make us totally free. We thought we were liberating ourselves from the bonds of Christianity. Instead, as Kingsnorth writes, quote, "Cut loose in a postmodern present with no center, no truth, no direction, we have not become independent-minded, responsible, democratic citizens in a human republic. We have become slaves to the power of money and worshipers of the self. We now have every gadget and comfort, but lack two things we really need: meaning and root." end quote. Meaning and roots. What did Adam and Eve lose once they ate the apple and they were locked out of the garden? They lost meaning and they lost their roots. Let me speak directly to you for a second. Why are meaning and roots so vital? Because a tree without roots blows over in the first severe thunderstorm. A human being without meaning turns to anesthetics. We turn to our screens, our pills, our drugs, sex, hyperpolarization, endless absurd consumption. We order garbage we don't need on Amazon Prime at 2 a.m. just to numb the anxiety of floating in an infinite nothing. Or at its worst, we sedate and numb ourselves into oblivion until life slowly falls away and we die. We feel this lack of meaning in our bones. We do. We all do. But we utterly refuse to admit the deep significance of it. We place blame on little side things without looking at the root. Here's Kingsnorth's ultimate diagnosis of our condition in that first section. Quote, when a plant is uprooted, it withers and dies. When the same happens to a person or a people or a planet full of both, the results are the same. Our crisis comes, I think, from our being unable to admit what, on some level, we know to be true. That we in the West are living in an obsolete story. Our culture isn't in danger of dying. It is already dead. We're in denial. This now is the reality we have to wrestle with and transcend, end quote. So why is it so hard to admit this? Well, let's turn to science and psychology specifically. Let's look at something called terror management theory. When human beings, when you and I are faced with dread or existential level threat or the collapse of our worldview, we don't logically pivot and say, oh, time to build something new. I was off a bit on that. No, we don't do that. We don't do that very often. We double down on what's already broken, right? We cling to the wreckage because the unknown void is way more terrifying than that wreckage we're living in. Don't believe me? Just stay with me. What if? What if our government and the concept of freedom and liberal Western democracy is dead already? That the game is being played by forces so deep, so profound, and so much so that you and I will never fully understand it, that you and I are nothing more than pathetic little pawns in a game, you know, Keanu Reeves Matrix-style pawns. What if we knew this and as an irrevocable confirmed fact, what would you do? How would you act? What would society do? How would we collectively react? Very scary, right? It's not unfathomable for us if we admit that democracy is dead and these fools in Washington, D.C. running things are just playing us for idiots like the poor soldiers in the Middle Ages who looked up on a hilltop and saw a dead king propped up on a horse, and then they give their lives for that king. It's hard to imagine. Culturally, philosophically, we are trapped in what you could almost call a simulation. We just keep pretending our institutions work. We go through the motions of dead political rituals and consumer habits. We're basically playing Weekend at Bernie's with Western culture, putting sunglasses on a corpse, dragging it around by the arms, and pretending it's still laughing at our jokes because facing the void takes entirely too much courage. And look, I know calling our culture dead sounds incredibly bleak, like hyperbolic bleak, but let me tell you why it's actually kind of liberating. When you get sick, you can't heal until you get the right diagnosis. And once you accept the old story is obsolete, you stop driving yourself crazy trying to fix a broken machine. You see this every day with politics and the two ideological left and right. When one side gets elected president, they scream in joy. The world is safe. We're going to change everything. It's going to be wonderful. And then what happens? Nothing happens, or it gets worse. So we flip to the other side, and then the other side is joyous. Yes, we won. Now we can restore order and sanity, and everything's going to get better. And then what happens? Nothing happens. See, when you accept that it's pretty much already dead and broken, you can step out of that wreckage, and you just stop pretending. There's peace in that. And you can finally start planting your own new roots. And that is exactly what we are going to do. But first, we need to know what we're up against. And so Kingsnorth in the book next week, we're moving on to chapter 4 through 11. If you're going to read along, I challenge you, always read along. Don't just take what I say and be done with it. I mean, if you just want to listen, that is so cool. Love you're here. But I challenge you to pick up the book. Hey, and by the way, don't read it on your app. Get the actual book, like feel it in your hands. Big difference. Anyway, just my opinion. But chapters 4 through 11, divining the machine. We're going to dig into exactly where the machine came from, where it was birthed, and how we created it. That's what we're doing next week. Read ahead if you have the book and are moving along with me. Let this book make you uncomfortable. It is in the discomfort that you, in your own mind and your own way, can make sense of your unique situation. I have the advantage and privilege to just speak to you from my perspective, but I don't want you to just accept my perspective. And in fact, that makes me a little uneasy. So challenge yourself and your assumptions and form your own opinions. And hopefully by the end, we're going to figure this out in our own way together. I'll see you next week.